If you're trying to battle your way out of low stakes poker, then you need to understand that exploits are everywhere. I just fired up a session with the aim of listing all of the exploits that I was making. I didn't know what they were going to be. The session was totally unscripted, but effortlessly, I got up to 10 exploits in absolutely no time at all. Add these 10 tricks and tips to your game. They're really going to help your win rate, but this is just scratching the surface. There are so many things you can do to propel your ascent from low stakes. I think it's very important that if you guys are playing low stakes, micro stakes, you take opens like ace-3, and depending on the opponent, even the 5-4 off that you saw there as well. You have a few options. You can go for 2.5, you can go for min. If you think your opponent is playing fast full charts, is leaderboard grinding, is trying to cram volume without really thinking, you want to go for min and you want to open pretty much anything. These are the kind of exploits pre-flop that just add a healthy dose of win rate to your game with very low effort, low maintenance. If you get called after you make that small, then you'll still be doing well post flop if you adopt the right strategy. So if you're playing low stakes, micro stakes, if villain does understand that they need to defend very wide against the min open, they're going to have a really weak range on the flop. And if you start with very small c bets when you whiff, even if the board isn't fantastic for your range, just start with a very small c bet. That is going to generate a lot more fold equity than it should. An in position player should be meeting minimum defense frequency on most flops, blind versus blind, and that requires a ton of defending if you're min betting, if you're betting one big blind, for example, on the flop. So this strategy of just opening really wide, c betting very small, it's a bit barbaric, right? It's not very sophisticated, but against switched off micro stakes and low stakes players, it's going to generate a lot of EV. Exploit number 1, min open a small blind and bet small on flops when you miss. It's going to get you out of micro stakes very quickly. The funny thing about these exploits is that I don't know what they're going to be today as I record this video. They're going to be whatever spots come up, and I think that's quite cool. So they're not going to be necessarily the 10 best exploits, but they're going to be very common probably because they're going to just come up in the space of 20 minutes of me recording here. Okay, so we have aces on the left table, threes on the right table. We have a half stack tight looking recreational who's still going to be calling threes. They snap check back the flop, and the turn comes something that they're very likely to miss if they don't have 9s or 10-9 specifically. I'm going to take a really exploitable line here, which is going to be an overbluffing line. The ace river is perhaps one that I will check on, one of the very few. They're going to have like queens or kings here mostly. My plan, by the way, is to bomb almost any river for a very big sizing, like, 3x pot or something. The thing with the ace river is I might be able to go all in and make them fold queens and kings and stuff, which is what they probably have more often than not. But when they have an ace, they're very unlikely to fold, whereas on a brick river, they can fold one pair of aces much more easily because it's just a lower absolute strength hand. So my turn lead with threes in isolation there's not a good play, but on almost every river, the ace I think is really the only one that this doesn't apply. I'm going to be going ahead and ripping it really big. So if there's a spot where your opponent is incredibly capped, set up for a big bluff, and that will mean building the pot on one street to be able to win the pot at a very high frequency on the next street. So you want to make sure that your first bet when you're betting twice there is small to medium enough that they don't fold the main stuff you're trying to make them fold immediately. Like if you 2x potted the turn, jamming the river would just be far less effective against a recreational. That's really how it goes here. Okay, a couple of hands going on. I'm going to go for a 2x pot with queen 4. This is the sort of hand I want in my flop bluffing range at a high frequency. On this board, it's going to be very uncomfortable for villain to defend. There are some hands on 9-3 deuce, like nut gut shots or a 9 with a bad kicker or something like that, that you probably have to defend at quite a high frequency because you can't just call a flush draw or a set, and you don't have a lot of 2-pair or any 2-pair really on that board. So the less 2-pair villain has on the board, the harder it's going to be for them to defend against B200. B200 is the sizing that I'm teaching for that spot in my new course that I'm in the process of building called Modern Master Plan, where we actually outline a sizing for all the different spots. This board here is in between, right, with the presence of the 9. What the 9 does here is it gives villain a lot more 2-pair combos than they might have on a board like ace queen deuce. So on ace queen deuce, we are definitely going for, again, the very big overbet or check strategy, because on that sort of board, you don't have queen deuce, ace deuce off, you don't have, and ace queen even will 3-bet pre-flop at some frequency, but The 9 is the card that you really do have, right? You have queen 9 off, ace 9 suited, maybe ace 9 off, depending on the preflop sizing, etc. So on ace queen 9, it's okay to just use the smaller bet. And in the new course, I'm kind of teaching really small bets and really big bets. That's like the only two sizes you're ever going to have to use if you're taking that course. So we're going to be doing a lot of leading here on low boards when population at low stakes and micro stakes checks behind on the flop, because on low boards like this, they're not really checking to slow play their overpair. Like the way they should be thinking about poker in these spots is, I have queens is not that thick a value hand on that many runouts. I need to be slow playing queens, especially in early position at some frequency. The investment ceiling for queens there just isn't that high across like all the different runouts that can come, basically. So villains should be thinking in that way and slow playing and checking behind, but they're not really doing that. And because they're not doing that, do I want to turn this into a bluff with sixes or make some sort of like weird bet here? I'm going to take a very strange play exploitatively and then explain it. So basically sixes is very, very vulnerable, and I can get called by 4s and 3s and ace 10 and stuff like this here as well. So it's like semi-value denial. I think I have the best hand more than I should. I think the line is just nonsense from the opponent, basically. I think we're doing really quite well there. This is a spot against a recreational where I don't mind just putting the hand into small raise always. And I'm going to start summarizing some of these exploits that we're taking here because they're coming thick and fast. I'm going to sit out. I'm going to do a bit of summary. By the way, if you like the way we teach the game at carrotcorner.com, check out the top link in the description. Have a look at our extensive premium course library. We have a lot of highly polished, edited academic style courses to take you from basically the beginning of cash game poker through to being a very accomplished player with a strong education under their belt. Use code EMBARK25 and save 25% off if you do pick up a course this week at Carrot Corner. There are 3 exploits to go over here. So starting off exploit number 3 for this video, turn probe relentlessly as a bluff on low boards. So when your head's up and your opponent checks back the flop, as we saw in the ace 5 hand, they are simply not going to want to put combos that they could perceive as thick value bets, as strong hands that could be vulnerable and are very good. They're just not going to want to put pocket kings into their check range. But under the gun against big blind is exactly where you should put some combos like that in your check range, because your EV is just not that high from building giant pots there as under the gun on lots of runouts with those hands. The difference between stronger poker players and weaker ones is that stronger ones understand the branching of the game tree and all the runouts that are possible, and they know the average worth of their hand across those runouts, and that's how they arrive at the conclusion that they don't need to bet the flop with kings there and that they want to protect their checking range, whereas weaker players are just going to see an overpair and actually have some delusion about pricing their opponent out of jack 10 or a flush draw or something that's never folding anyway. So when you face check there, your probe will work far more often than it would against a solver, and so you should make it not just with ace 5 like a hand with a gut shot there. You should just probe relentlessly in that spot. Okay, moving on to sixes. Exploit number 4 for climbing your way out of these stakes as quickly as possible. When you think your opponent's range is dramatically overfolding, just bet small with any hand that likes fold equity. So when you think your opponent's range is dramatically overfolding, bet small on the turn in position with any hand that likes fold equity. Sixes likes fold equity. It's a very vulnerable hand. It can get called by worse, something like ace 10 that's got ace x and just turned a gut shot, for example, an underpair that led the flop like 4s because it thought you had ace king, and you know the fish rhetoric goes on. You don't need to be terrified about making polarization mistakes. You don't need to be really worried that your hand is too medium when all you're doing is betting small with a thin vulnerable hand that could get called by something worse. There's never anything wrong with that when you're facing one of these really underprotected ranges, and it's a very good way to just clean up equity, get a little bit of value, just make sure you win the pot the vast majority of the time. Bet small with your vulnerable thin value bets against very weak overfolding ranges. And then moving on to the hand where we raise the flop with the underpair and backdoor flush draw. This raise is not too ridiculous in theory, and when you're going small you can absolutely decimate the pool and their lazy range bet strategies in such spots. What you saw me do there was take a hand that, okay, raising could be a thing, it's not bad to raise the hand anyway, and I just soft exploited it. I just raised it all the time. Remember from last video, a soft exploit is when we take a hand that could do something in theory and we dial up the frequency to 100. We do it all the time with that hand. Cash injection, remember code EMBARK25 to save on that course and all the other ones at Carrot Corner. Cash Injection talks about this extensively in episode 1. It node locks lots of different spots to show you just how incompetent the pool is at reacting to check raises after they've bet range. We live in a lazy era of Gen Z poker players' betting range because they're lazy. Just kidding, the millennials like me are lazy too. We do it also. But we live in this era where people know the first thing, but they don't know the reaction and they don't know the response to the reaction. So the lazy range bet isn't bad in and of itself. It's bad when you run into someone who's relentlessly attacking it and you don't know how to defend it. So that's why something can show up as having no EV loss in a solver. It's like, it's fine to range bet. It's not a mistake. There's no EV loss that's relevant. It's permissible, whatever. But actually, in the exploitative battle that ensues thereafter, the range better's getting decimated by the guy that's just using the small flop raise. Like, your opponents aren't even sensitive to the fact that you went so small with your flop raise there. They're not noticing that. They're not realizing that like all pocket pairs are becoming defense now or whatever because of that. And that's where the EV lies. And that is exploit number 5 for today. If you think your hand's a mixed raise in theory, pure raise it against a lazy range bet looking line. Let's jump back in. Let's see how many more we can find. You can see how easy it is to come across these exploits. We're not having to look very hard here, guys. Okay, we come to another exploit number 6, which is if you have a mixed raise in position and your mixed raise would be a 3-bet or a call, or even a 3-bet or a fold, or a 3-bet, a call, or a fold, you should just 3-bet it. The EV will flow to you. We've been over this so many times. This 3-bet makes more in practice than it should in theory because we don't get 4-bet or cold 4-bet like this often enough, and therefore when we do, we're just clearly folding this hand. And when villain calls, we're going to have a very easy spot to play where we're going to know where our exploits are. We're going to know where we should be aggressing for extra fold equity, tripling, etc. Villain is going to be missing flop check raises. They're going to be just having a nightmare of a time trying to play out of position hijack versus button 3-bet pot. You know yourself how you feel when you call out of the hijack against an in position 3-bet. Things get very messy for you. This is a spot I'm just always going to bet, and the reason for that is that when I check here, I give multiple free cards to 2 opponents who are just not going to be making my life difficult on the flop here. The bluffs they need to find on king 3-3 are things that, well, first off, we block quite heavily, which is good because we'd be bet folding our hand because it'd be the 4-5 of spades or diamonds that we're blocking. But also, we're just not going to see bluff raises. It's not a spot where someone's like, aha, 3-way with a backdoor, let me attack a bone dry king high board, even though they have trips and they would be raising trips all the time. They don't think that they therefore should build a giant sizing bluff check raise. That's what they should do. They don't do it. So exploit number 7, bet your thin bluffs and value hands that like fold equity in spots where pool is under check raising, especially multi-way, because the denial you're getting is so much more worthwhile. This is already up to 7 exploits, I believe. 7? That's a lot of exploits, and it's happened in like 10 minutes. This has not been very difficult, right? It's 3-bet ace king. My advice to you guys in spots like this, if you have a second, is to just double check who your opponent is in the lobby. You can, I know we're hiding screen names today, but you can look at their screen name, you can organize the GG lobby alphabetically, and you can find out how many players they're playing. That player, for example, was playing 3 tables. That makes it very likely that they're a reg, right? So if they were to 4-bet you there, you don't feel that bad about jamming the ace king, whereas there's some like nitty players that you would feel bad doing that against. So it's just worthwhile. One other thing you can do before your session is open up the lobby, tag the 4 tablers, tag the 1 tablers, just have a generic, Benabad Beat calls it reg on probation or recreational on probation tag, and that just saves you so much bandwidth when you're actually in a session, because you can just see who villain is and you don't need to worry about like, is this a reg? They have a 26 VPEP, it's ambiguous. You just kind of know already because you've tagged the lobby. So this spot here, it's another exploit, and it is be involved with very bad looking players when you're only making a small deviation to do so. Be involved. So this guy only has 50 big blinds, which is a bit annoying. I'd rather they had more, but I don't think 9-8 off is very far outside of a defense range from the big blind. It really isn't. And so you should always take this spot. Now, I think my hand's a lot better than it should be here, so I'm going to go with a half pot probe. I don't think this is the sort of spot that gets attacked a lot if I check. When villains quickly calls, unfortunately they are going to connect with this queen river a lot. They're going to have queen 10, king queen, club, hands like this. I don't think I can get any more value. I don't think I can bluff catch this node either. It's just too likely that villain has a strong hand now. This is a very, very underbluff line. So when they call you and then they go big, this is the kiss of death. So exploit number 9, because number 8 was that we want to be involved, and exploit number 9 is that we want to fold to the line of call and then a big bet when checked to. That line is very hard to bluff enough with because you've had to filter your range to call in the first place. The only exception might be when there's not many value combos and loads of draws brick. It's the opposite thing there, right? Like the draws all got there and there were tons of value combos. That would be an abysmal call by us. It's exactly the kind of spot you want to be overfolding against recreational players. We're up to 9. We've got one more exploit to go here, guys. One more. And then we have basically put 10 exploits together in 20 minutes or something. That's not bad bang for your buck as far as YouTube goes because it's free. So the return on investment is infinite. And even if you had to pay for this, like this would have been like extremely good value, right? I mean, it's just so important to think exploitatively when you're actually trying to make money playing poker. There's nothing wrong with drilling your theory and getting good at that. But when it comes time to put in volume, you have to be making habitually exploitatively right actions because you're not indifferent in real life against this pool. This is 100 Russian cash. If you're playing 25 NL, you're even less indifferent. And it would be such a shame if you're just like trying to apply your theory game in all these spots. That's why we have videos like this. That's why we have courses like Grade E of the Carrot Poker Schools. You can see how the mass data goes in every spot. That's why we have courses like Weapons of War. So 4-3 off. It's getting quite bad, but 40 VPIP. I'm going to pass on this one because the hand is just that bad. But you know what? It could be okay to call there. I think 6-5 off or something I would call. If I had more time, I would scour the lobby and just see, you know, is that definitely a recreational? Are they definitely playing one table? If they are, I'm way more likely to want to defend, right? Let's see if we can get one more of these juicy exploits to make it up to 10. And then we'll recap everything in a conclusion. How does that sound, guys? You're sitting there nodding away in your living room like, yes, that sounds very good, Mr. Carrotman. Yes, yes, yes. Kind of mixed open, but recreational small blind. Definitely want to take the spot. A good reg here would react to the fact that there's a recreational there. No one's really doing that at the stakes you guys are mostly playing. Don't worry about it. Just because you could be punished for something in theory doesn't mean you're being punished for it in real life. And one of the more problematic delusions I see people suffer from is the thought that because there's an exploit available to my strategy, villain must be finding it. I'm going to min open here. I just want to be involved with this player and they're not going to react well. 45 VPIP, paradoxically, is not going to react well to the min raise. Like they're probably just folding some of the trash hands they shouldn't. And then if I go bigger, they're just calling too much. So go big with a big hand and smaller with a small hand. That's kind of another caveman exploit. Jack 10-7, I'm going to be using small bets whenever I bet. And villain calls, you see that timing? This is going to be exploit number 10. Always bluff mixed bluffs on the next street when villain's timing on the first street was instant. And you can size up. You can go bigger than normal because he's just told us that he has literally 8-7 or King 10 or Jack 6 suited or something like that. He has just told us he does not have 2-pair. Does not even probably have a pair and a draw, although it's possible. Okay, guys, that is exploit number 10. Always bluff the next street when you have an optional bluff in theory and your opponent's timing was lightning speed on the flop. Let's see if this player wants to do anything about the B200 here. Again, King 5, overcard to second pair, backdoor straight stuff, unblocking a lot of folding range. Good spot. Gonna set our next big blind. 5-3. In it to win it spot. Very happy here. Villain checks. This is a bit of a weird check, honestly. They have a 6-9 VPIP. They're probably opening everything. They have a lot of different hands here. I think I prefer check on this board. I'm a little bit suspicious of check here. I don't think it's going to be as much random air as it would be on some low board. And then they bet half pot. Like, what are they saying they have here? Like 1-pair, something like that. Do I like raise in this spot? Probably not. Do I like call and then bluff later or redraw or have the best hand? Yeah, I think there's enough going on that we can just call. There's our redraw. If villain checks, we will value bet this card. And if villain bets, we'll probably just call. If they go huge, we might fold. We might fold this run out. Our hand becomes a catcher. Can we raise here? I don't think so. Honestly, it's if they went smaller, it's probably okay. I think it's slightly too thin to raise here. Maybe we can against half pot. Not sure. You can let me know what you think about that final hand in the comments. Here are the 10 exploits again. Let's recap. Exploit number 1. Open very wide from small blind and c-bet aggressively for small sizing with your weak hands. Exploit number 2. When you think your opponent is very capped, don't be afraid to set up for big river bluffs by betting turn a small to medium sizing. Number 3, when your opponent checks back at low stakes and micro stakes, probe the turn relentlessly if the flop was low, as long as the turn card isn't something like an ace or a king. These checking ranges on low boards are going to be egregiously underprotected. The fold equity is going to be through the roof. Exploit number 4, when villain is weak and giving up a lot, they take a line like bet the flop and then check the turn. For example, bet small in position and don't be afraid to do so with very vulnerable medium looking hands. You can't really make polarization mistakes in these spots. Fold equity is so high and so useful for your low vulnerable pairs that you should just bet them in these situations. Number 5, if you think your hand is a mixed flop raise in theory against what looks to be a small c-bet, the dreaded range bet, then you should just always raise, as a bluff especially. Number 6, if you have a mixed 3-bet in position in theory, 3-bet the hand, take the spot. Generally, the 4-bet stats at low stakes and micro stakes are a bit below where they need to be theoretically, and people are not the best at attacking you after the flop. When they call your 3-bets, you're just going to have free roam to generate EV post-flop as well, especially if you know where to be aggressive. Point number 7, c-bet small with weak and vulnerable hands when you're not getting raised enough. This could be heads up, it could be multi-way. Any spot where you think people are going to miss out on bluff raises, don't be afraid to make that small c-bet, even if you have absolutely nothing, even if you're 3-way. Point number 8, do get involved with hands that are just outside of a normal defense range pre-flop when you're against a weak opponent. The skill edge that you're going to get by just being in it to win it against said player is going to outweigh whatever minuscule EV loss you'd be suffering in theory by defending that hand. Point number 9, don't bluff catch versus the line of call and then a big bet. When villain filters by calling one of your bets and then bets big on the next opportunity themselves, they're just going to be under bluffing. Their range is contracted. They're not going to have as many natural bluffs. The one exception to that could be if there are a ton of misdraws that they can get to river with and not that many value hands. And finally, point number 10, always bluff turn with optional bluffs when the flop call was fast. We saw just how face up and transparent that flop call was in the final hand today. Take advantage of that. Try to notice timing in the first place. That's the only way you're going to become the beneficiary of these tells. And don't be afraid to execute on a timing tell. They are accurate. This is humans you're playing against. They're not instantly clicking call with some slow play on the flop. They're not even doing that with a hand that they could think about raising. So do take advantage. You guys have seen today just how easy it was for me to just sit there and ramble off a bunch of exploits as they came. These things come up every minute in your session. If you're playing a 50-minute session and you're armed with 10, 20, 30 exploits like that, you are going to be able to execute 15 to 30 times in that session and generate an absolute ton of EV. When you play 100,000 hands, 500,000 hands, 1,000,000 hands in your career and you have these good exploitative habits, it makes a gigantic difference in win rate. So ask yourselves, what else can you add to this list? What else are you going to do to build better exploitative habits? And are you playing a bit too much on autopilot? If you like the way we teach the game, carrotcorner.com, embark 25 for 25% off. Top link in the description. See you next time for more poker education.